good to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about driving large-scale change and making content more valuable and useful across the enterprise. I'm going to use a case study from this small project they've talked about at Eurosport, but I think there's a lot of parallels to this across other sectors as well. So to set things up, the drivers of change. So, of course, everybody gets up on stage and says change is going faster than it ever has before. Our businesses are evolving faster than ever. It's exactly true. And this is wonderful because this is a great opportunity to drive the business and to drive new infrastructure and new ways of working. Right? We need business change to spur innovation, to spur us to do things differently. And driving this from a technical aspect is digital transformation. By this, it's the cloud, it's as-a-service models, it's thinking about agile-based approaches, both in how we produce things and how we distribute them. It's utilizing data in more effective ways. And why are we doing that? Because the consumer expectations are changing. Certainly in media, the consumers expect to be able to see what they want to see, where they want to see it, and pay how they want to pay, right? Probably no different than any of your businesses as well. Consumers' expectations are changing. It was mentioned on the panel before that our consumers are used to engaging in different ways. They expect to be able to do the same thing with our products and services. And along with that, the increasing value of data. And so data is one of these things that people have talked about forever being really, really important. And we think a lot about data. Sometimes we think and talk about data more than we really action and spend money and effort around what we can utilize data for. And data influences not only how we understand our consumers, how we understand the content and its utilization, or our products and its utilization, but also how we run our business. How do we understand how efficient we are? How do we understand how we can improve things? And even our customers who are worried about privacy and security and things like that, of course, also understand the exchange value of data. When somebody gives a little piece of data, they know there's some value proposition in that. And if they get returned value, they're quite happy to do that, right? So when a customer engages fully in your product or your service or your content, and they're willing to give data and information about themselves, it means they're getting direct value back from that. And we need to respect that. And then we need to really monetize it. And the last is something that's accelerated during the pandemic, but is this interaction with the employee. The employees now also want to work differently. They want to work in the way they want to work, where they want to work. They want to live where they want to work, and they want to respect the company they work for more than ever. This is why diversity and inclusion is at the top of everybody's priority list for very good reasons, and why hybrid ways of working, is what is becoming the norm. So this is something that's also changing how we need to think about the business and how we think about the infrastructure and our systems that support it. So the future, everything in the cloud, everything hybrid, you can do anything you want from anywhere, get anything you want, right? That's the sort of future, I think, most businesses. However, today, we're in a hybrid world, right? Not everything is in the cloud. Not everything is software-based. And we're hybrid working, right? Sometimes we're in the office, sometimes we're on the road, sometimes we're at home, and so we're in this mixed environment that we need to embrace, okay? So maybe eventually you can do absolutely everything you want from anywhere and engage any way you want to engage, and everything can be completely and instantly scalable in the cloud. But for now, we're in this hybrid world, okay? And so it's something we have to embrace and support. If we dive a level deeper here, there's some trends that are really driving this. And so the public cloud here in the center, because we see that's where things are going, right, overall. But at the top here, we're going to go around multidisciplinary. So in media or content worlds, multidisciplinary often means digital and linear, social, the different levels of marketing, the different types of things. But probably in all of your businesses, there's a multidisciplinary aspect. There's the external aspect. There's the internal aspect. And we need to, as technology and operations people, embrace both of those. Because ultimately, we don't really want separate systems or separate infrastructures or separate content flows supporting the things that we do inside the business, the things we do to one set of customers, and the things we do to another set of customers. Absolutely, as David said, in news and sports, where I've focused most of my career, time is everything. right? And so both for CNN when I was there and for Eurosport, the whole aspect here was how can we get content to all platforms and users as fast as absolutely possible. And the way to do that, of course, is to put content in a common place. Hybrid production. So hybrid production for us in media means you don't have to go to a production center. You don't have to all sit in a production truck. You can start to distribute the workload. For all of you, it probably means different aspects for how you collaborate, how you work together, how the different parts of the business work together. And this, of course, is one of the aspects. This and the hybrid working were accelerated during the pandemic. We had started this. We were already doing things lots of virtually before, but we really accelerated it when we had to. And it saved us, right? Being able to continue to produce live news and live sport in the pandemic. IT and IP, so in here it's Internet Protocol, not and IT. So this is really focusing on the aspect of moving things to a software and an as a service model is what I really mean here. Really thinking about things as everything is data and data integration as opposed to physical workflows that are powering our business. Virtualized tech is a step to get there. So in many of your businesses, currently in media, we still have things that cannot be done in software. There's still some video processing, some audio processing that unfortunately today still has to be done on a piece of hardware. The more we treat that as a virtualized piece of technology, it allows us to to transition to the public cloud faster in the future. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Private cloud is a step then to the public cloud, and this is when you need to use a combination of your own technology or custom technology along with software. And something, I think, when I started in this business, the first thing you had to do when you talk about a new business or a new proposition is figure out where the data center was going to be and build that data center yourself, right? And it was one of the longest lead aspects of it. In the project for Eurosport, we used third-party data centers in a private cloud approach. I signed the papers to lease the space and moved equipment in on the same day, right? I was not held by that, and that saved about 1.5 years in the project alone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this project at Eurosport. And so Eurosport, many of you may be familiar with Eurosport. Eurosport is actually a really complex beast, more hours of live sport than any other broadcaster in the world, and does it in 19 different languages. The story starts very similarly, probably to stories you've all lived. Aging set of infrastructure. In fact, I started in 2018. The last time they had made a major investment in technology was 2009. They've evolved a little bit to then, but that was commonplace in media. About every 10 years, big format change, and at that point actually it was HD and video, and then in a matter of 10 years you want to think about something else or something. But what we did in here is we said, okay, well we got this limited infrastructure. We need the ability to change. We need to support growth, especially digital growth. But we didn't just say, hey, it's going to be a format change. So how can we handle 4K, or how can we handle more types of audio, more channels of audio? What we said is, how can we change this so it's in an infrastructure that can constantly evolve? It's not tied to a particular location. We're going to lower costs for adding new services. So we really wanted to take this kind of cloud-based approach, right, where you can instantly turn things up, instantly change things, instantly grow, and not be dependent on formats or locations or workflows or even the businesses that we were supporting. So I've used this slide hundreds and hundreds of times, and really the important thing, my message from this is that what this slide tells us is that this is how we explained it to the business. We explained that it really 3 things, and it was important to have this. Why are we doing this project, right? We wanted to enable live production. The business was all about live production. Our audience is all about live production. And so the number one thing is we want to be able to support live production in a more dynamic way. We wanted to be able to have remote production, agile-based production. We wanted to be able to get more streams out of more events, right? So that we could provide more content to all of our audiences. We wanted to support both the efficiency of our linear businesses and the growth of our digital businesses. And that's really all about getting content in a common and shareable way, right? Making sure that content can be extended into all parts of the business. And then we wanted to improve the business itself, the bottom line of the business, right? We wanted this to have a financial return, and that was important, okay? So this was the largest project that going in Discovery, and it had less than a 3-year return on investment, and we tracked it, and we measured it, and it did it. Or we'll do it this year, actually. So, and that's an important aspect, and not to be shy about why you're doing these things. The project was complex. There were 17 different work streams, all running simultaneously. And so we needed some foundations that everybody could make decisions on. At times there were 200 people working on the project. And so we wanted people to be able to have some foundational statements that they could really hold on to when they needed to decide if they go left or right. What do they think about, okay? Cloud approach to physical kit. Now this is maybe somewhat unique for media, but I don't think it is so, which is that, when we have some equipment that is still hardware-based, right? But we actually went through extra effort. We wrapped it in a provisioning layer. We orchestrated it. We allowed it to be more agile. We moved it into a central location so it could be centrally managed, right? So instead of the equipment being all in our different production centers, there are a dozen production centers around Europe, that was all in a central location, yet accessed remotely. So we treated it like it was a piece of software. And so when it is a piece of software, we can change it, and nobody will know, right? They can change it out, and no one will know. Common access to all content. I mentioned this before. Key driver for the business is that content. We all have these core assets. They're the valuable thing, and the more you give access to those assets, the better, right? The more from the time they start, you've got an asset. Whether it ever makes it anywhere, it's still an asset, and you need to be able to capture it, share it, and manage it in a really effective way. IP provided us the scale and flexibility. So in a media business, historically, to get signals, especially in live production, you're restricted by this piece of hardware called a router. It was a video and audio router. And the really big one is like 1,000 squared. In this project, there's 150,000 pieces of equipment connected to a 400 gigabit IT network, standard IT network. And there's over, on a standard day, 60,000 streams running, all SDN managed. And so the scale, we just broke it apart. We just blew the lid off the scale of what you can do in a media company. And the point is take a different approach to the technology infrastructure, allowed us to completely change how we had to think about the business, how we had to think about the infrastructure. And then remote production for all. This means that, I talked about the OB trucks, the production trucks, and the production studios. During the pandemic, we had people producing their shows from their bedrooms, doing graphics from their living room, using WeWork facilities. We were using every different aspect we could use. Because we were taking this aspect of virtualized technology, with a laptop, you could get access to absolutely every piece of production technology. And a laptop didn't have to be anything special because everything is being virtualized from the technology hubs. So a lot of challenge in this project, you can imagine. A huge amount of change in a very aggressive project plan. When I came in beginning of 2018, the idea was to have the bulk of it done for the 2020 Olympics. And so we went from, and they had the idea, but they didn't have the plan on how to do it. So they had the idea of what they wanted to do. And I came in and actually, stepped back a minute and and blew up the idea to be 3 times bigger, because it was originally just about the Paris facility, and I expanded it to include all aspects of Eurosport. So aggressive plan, but, a large amount of change. The vendor support, this is very new. The vendors were, in our vendors, both the system integrators, the technology vendors in the space, the standards were still evolving. Their ability to support was still evolving. There's still today a large division between old and new. Some people say, I like the idea of this, but I'm not quite ready, right? So the vendors are getting mixed messages, and this probably happens in your industries as well, where some say, I like the way things are, and some things say, I want to completely do it differently. And the poor vendors are kind of struggling. Where do I invest, right? And so what we found is we really had to encourage them and do a lot more testing. than we had to do in the past. And because of that, the way you manage systems was still evolving, right? Media was taking historically takes a kind of media-centric way to manage things. And I wanted it to be more IT-centric, right? And that was very foreign, to many vendors and to our internal teams as well. And we certainly broke new ground about this doing the traditional kit as a piece of software. And in the middle of this, of course, we had to send everybody home and start working completely remotely because of the pandemic. But there are some things that helped us. Really strong project management and program management. We had a very active-based, agile-based approach to it. We invested a lot in test labs. And that was really important. And the good news is, the more software-based approaches you take, and the more cloud-based approaches to this, the more possible it is to actually have all the levels of environments you really need. Historically, for us, you might have a small test lab with a piece of gear or something in it that it was nothing close to what your real environment was like. But once you move it to the cloud, you very instantly can have your production environment, your QA environment, your testing environment, and your develop environment. So it's very easy to have these different environments, easy to roll forward, easy to roll back. We increased vendor participation. In fact, in this project, we did not do one RFP. We decided there wasn't time to do RFPs, and that RFPs generally, you spend about a year doing an RFP process, and at the end of it, things in your business have changed, the landscape has changed, and so you needed to modify things anyway. So what we did instead, we did something we called partner identification, and we identified partners that we thought could work with us in an agile way. And so we gave them the general scope, we negotiated on the terms of engagement, and then we engaged with them agilely. This worked with all but one vendor. So one vendor we had to change out because it just didn't work. But I was pretty impressed with that, with the ability for vendors to think in a very agile way. We had very good security and health policies. And so, in a horrible situation, the pandemic, we're actually able to keep most of everything moving at pace. Zoom and Slack from infrastructure and collaborations certainly saved us. And we got a little bit of a delay on the Olympics, so the 2020 games shifted to 2021. Thankfully, we didn't achieve more than we were originally going to achieve by the time we went into those games, but that certainly, the extra year certainly helped us a lot. What did we learn? Invest more in change management. If I were to do one thing differently on the project, I would invest more in change management than we did. We certainly had active change management, but it's one of the areas we cut back on budget-wise. And I would not do that again because I think it's really important to keep everybody engaged. Re-clarifying the benefits and the goals constantly. And one thing I will say on this is I think we, like most, are better at communicating down into the organization. Somewhat okay, about the people that are going to be directly affected, right? Talk to the editors, talk to the producers, so forth, right? Somewhat good about explaining to the broader organization, hey, marketing, here's what we're doing, right? And things like that. And then actually less good at explaining things to the leadership, right? We got the approval, okay? We came back to them every 3 months, told them how the project was going, right? But I would encourage you to be really active on all 360 degrees. Because you need everybody's support when things get tough, and things will get tough. Change, there's no way to go through change without having a dip in productivity, right? And so what you want to do is you want to make that dip shallow and short, and to do that, you need support all the way around, okay? And so I think that's one thing I would really tell you is invest more in change management and communicate 360 degrees actively all the time, to the point that people are telling you, I know, I got it. I'm with you, right? That's what you want. Certainly couple the change with workflow change when possible. This is not always possible, and if you can't do the workflow change at the same time, my advice is do the workflow change first, okay, and then the technology, because if you do it the other way, people say, well, this is a new tool, but it doesn't work the way I'm used to working, and so they won't see some of the advantages. You need them to change to take advantage of the new workflow, right, and the new tools. Agile development also needs agile test cycles, right? And I see this around with a lot of other peers in the industry. We were developing software, some software was coming out every 2 weeks from some of our vendors and our internal teams. Doing 2 weeks and then 2 weeks testing cycles constantly is challenging, but you got to be ready to do it. Because if you skip a few cycles and then you find a problem, you got to try to figure out now which release did it come in, right? So you really have to have an agile process all the way through. So increasing that testing and really aligning then on how you're going to operate it. So everybody understands, how am I going to operate it? How am I going to measure it? How am I going to know that things are working? But the impact is quite big, right? So these stats compare the 2018 Winter Games to the 2022 Winter Games, sorry. And we had big audiences in 2018 as well. But the web and app reach 142% higher, right? 19 times more minutes streamed, social engagement up 5 times. That's because they had better access to content, right? We had better access to content. The digital audience saw every minute of every event in the Olympics, and they saw it in every language that we produced, which is not the same as what they had 4 years before. And it pays off. And that was easy, and that came just a natural aspect. We already had the content. We just had to put it in a forum that was easily extendable. And we were still achieving strong linear audiences. 88% is an impressive share. In the Nordics, where obviously winter sports are hugely popular, but that number is really impressive given that linear television audiences have dropped significantly in those 4 years. So the point is here, you can make, this content was doing well in linear, and it was doing really, really well in digital and social. And measuring that and being able to brag about that is super important for the whole business. Because you go through this change, it's not easy, right? So you really want to be able to understand it and really talk about it. So my last slide, and this is really just some motivators that I think are important for us all to think about when we navigate change, right? Go all in when you can, right? I think that especially as people approach the cloud models, I hear people still say, well, it's more expensive than what I do now, and I got to pay to move the content up and pay to move the content down, and I got to pay these transaction fees, or I don't know how. We found if you go all in, it's absolutely going to be better. It's going to be cheaper, it's going to be more secure, it's going to be more scalable, it's going to be more resilient, but the more you take in, the better. And so certainly Discovery did this on it. Discovery has hundreds, over 500 linear channels running completely in the public cloud today, right? So the more you go all in, the better. Take a cloud, and when you can't go in, take a cloud approach, right? Take an approach that will be naturally like the cloud. Think about it as something you have to provision and orchestrate. Think about something you have to manage and support as if it were a cloud-based asset, even if it's a physical piece of equipment. Support and embrace remote and virtualized production and ways of working. The employees want this. It creates greater flexibility. It creates greater utilization of your people, right? You can put your best people on the best things. There's no restrictions based upon where they want to work or how they want to work. And take advantage of business models. These are your motivators. I said from the start of the talk, that business evolution is a terrific motivator, right? Make sure you're using that to accelerate and tell the story of why you're doing this and to support the growth of the business. Encourage the vendors and look for new ways to work with them, right? The vendors need your help in order to understand where to focus and where to embrace and how to change, right? And how to interact with you differently, right? But allow more testing time, okay? Because if you're going to engage differently, you're probably going to get different levels of response. We certainly found that in an agile-based approach. As you learned things along the way, the scope of the project changed, what you needed to do, and what you needed to test and change differently. And the cornerstone of this, underneath it all, make sure your security or your network architectures are sound, okay? Especially security, right? These are the things that you need to get right because they become huge distractions if you don't, okay? And they don't sometimes get enough attention. So with that, I will thank you for your time, and I'm certainly happy to answer questions if we have time.